Okay, just imagine this for a second. A single, short conversation on a golf course brings an entire continent to its knees. A simple trade dispute suddenly blows up into a demand for actual sovereign territory. We're going to explore a pretty wild, high-stakes scenario where Europe is sitting on an economic arsenal, one that's powerful enough to completely shake America. But for some reason, they seem totally unwilling or maybe unable to actually use it.
And it all kicks off with this really stark declaration. So on July 27, 2025, the French Prime Minister tweets this out, and it just perfectly captures this feeling of deep humiliation that was spreading all across Europe. But what on earth could have happened to cause a statement like that?
Well, the setting for this continental crisis, it wasn't some formal summit, not a big presidential palace. Nope, it was a golf course in Scotland. That's where Europe's lead negotiator met with then-President Donald Trump for a meeting that lasted only 40 minutes, but would send absolute shockwaves around the world.
So this brings us to the big question, right? How did a massive economic powerhouse like the European Union get so completely outmaneuvered? To really get what happened on that golf course, we've got to rewind the clock just a few months. The whole story really starts with a brutal trade war. And from the get-go, Europe's strategy was basically one of appeasement, just trying to calm things down. But as we're about to see, that strategy came with a very, very high price. The pressure just built up so fast. Okay, so on April 2nd, Trump drops a 20% tariff announcement. Europe is, of course, stunned, but starts planning a countermove. But before they can even do anything, Trump just escalates again, saying, nope, the deal is a 50% tariff. By July 13th, he makes it official with the 30% tariff, basically pushing Europe's back right up against the wall and leading directly to that fateful meeting on the golf course.
And after just 40 minutes, the deal was done. The U.S. would impose a 15% tariff on European goods. And in return, the EU would impose, well, nothing. Zero. A big fat nothing. Europe had basically just agreed to take a punch without even putting its hands up.
Now, you'd think that this kind of humiliating concession would at least buy Europe some peace, right? You would be wrong. So wrong. In fact, what Europe saw as trying to keep the peace, the White House apparently saw as weakness. And that led to an even more unbelievable demand.
And here it is, a direct message from the president. This wasn't about tariffs anymore. It was about territory. The demand was for Denmark, a fellow European and NATO ally, to just hand over Greenland to the United States.
So, why Greenland? What's the big deal? Well, let me tell you, it's not just a giant block of ice. As the world's largest island, it is the key to controlling the Arctic. It's also sitting on a massive treasure trove of rare earth minerals. The stuff you need for all our modern tech. And on top of that, it has potentially trillions of dollars worth of undiscovered oil and gas. It is a massive geopolitical and economic jackpot.
So as European leaders were kind of just hesitating, not really sure how to respond to this totally unprecedented demand, one country started to lose its patience. France, which had been arguing for a tougher stance all along, began to rally the continent to actually fight back. But that hesitation, it had consequences. Seeing Europe's indecisiveness, Trump didn't wait around. On January 17, 2026, he just slapped the EU with another round of tariffs, basically punishing them for not responding to his Greenland demand quickly enough. And that was the final straw for Paris. President Macron's office released this statement, and it was a really clear, pointed message to his European allies. He was signaling that, hey, Europe has power, it has weapons, and it is finally time to use them. But what exactly are these tools?
Okay, so this brings us to Europe's secret weapon. It is a tool so powerful that people on the inside actually call it the bazooka. Now, officially, it's known as the Anti-Coercion Instrument, or ACI.
And the ACI wasn't just some dusty old rule. It was specifically designed for a situation exactly like this one. It was created back in 2023 to fight economic bullying, and it gives the EU a unified and really powerful way to hit back. And here's the most startling fact of all. It has never been used. Not once.
So how does this bazooka actually work? Well, it lets the EU, as one single bloc, launch a whole bunch of economic attacks at once. They can slap on tariffs, they can restrict American companies from investing in Europe, they can hit US tech giants with huge fees, and they can even ban American firms from getting those juicy public contracts. It is designed to inflict some serious, targeted economic pain.
But as powerful as the ACI is, believe it or not, it's not the ultimate deterrent.
there is another, way more drastic option available to Europe, a financial weapon of truly massive proportions.
Just let this number sink in for a second. $8 trillion. That's the value of U.S. bonds and stocks that are held by European governments alone. That is a colossal amount of financial leverage that Europe holds right over the American economy. But wait, it gets even bigger, because when you add in the assets held by private European funds, the total number just skyrockets to $12.6 trillion. To put that in perspective for you, that is more than half of the entire U.S. GDP.
This is what analysts call the nuclear option. The idea is that Europe could just start selling off or dumping these trillions in U.S. assets. The panic that would cause could collapse the U.S. bond market and trigger a financial crisis that could rival 2008. Now, of course, it's a mutually destructive option. It would wreck Europe's finances too, but just having it as a threat is an incredibly powerful card to hold.
And this brings us right to the heart of the whole dilemma. If Europe is armed with an economic bazooka and a financial nuclear option, why has it consistently chosen to just take it on the chin? Why the hesitation to fight back?
The choice they face is incredibly stark. I mean, look at it. On one side, confronting the U.S. means risking an immediate, very painful economic war, with the potential for just mutual destruction. But on the other hand, appeasement avoids that short-term pain, but it comes at the cost of constant humiliation and, as we've already seen, demands that just get bigger and bigger.
Gideon Rashman of the Financial Times, I think he put it perfectly here. His argument is that the path of least resistance, just surrendering, is actually the most dangerous one in the long run. It just projects weakness, and that invites more aggression.
And you know what? There's history to back this up. Other big global players, like China and Brazil, they've pushed back hard against similar pressure tactics. And in the end, their resistance actually made the U.S. back down. The lesson here seems to be that in this kind of fight, strength gets respect and weakness gets exploited.
So we end with this question. Europe is at a historic crossroads. It has the power to stand up for itself, but doing that carries enormous risk. In this new era of geopolitical hardball, is their cautious, patient approach a sign of strategic wisdom, or is it a fatal weakness that is just inviting its own downfall? The choice they make? Well, it could define the continent for decades to come.